The Fall of Berlin, through German eyes. April 16, 1945. The earth shakes as three Soviet fronts launch the final crushing blow of the World War II in Europe. The target? Berlin. The goal? To bring the Nazi Reich to its knees. We know the story of the victors. The triumphant red banner over the Reichstag, the metronomic march of Soviet soldiers. But what did it look like from the other side? What was it like to be a German soldier armed with little more than a Panzerfaust? A civilian huddled in a U-Bahn station? Or a general bound by a suicidal oath staring into the abyss? This is the Battle of Berlin, stripped of propaganda, told from the German perspective. 1. The precipice, a nation on the brink of collapse. By the spring of 1945, the Third Reich was a corpse, still twitching. Its former allies had turned against it. Then, in January, the Soviet steamroller began its Vistula-Oder offensive, a cataclysm of 2.5 million men. It wasn't a battle, it was an annihilation. Germany lost not just hundreds of thousands of its last experienced soldiers, but in Silesia, its very industrial lungs. The miracle weapons, the V-2 rockets and Me-262 jets, were technological marvels, but they were too few, too late, and their factories were now just rubble. The war was lost, but the dying was far from over. Somehow, this comprehensive disaster jolted Hitler back to a grim reality. He finally appointed a professional soldier, General Heinrici, a master of defensive warfare, to perform the impossible, save Berlin. 2. The Iron Curtain of the Oder, Heinricis's cunning gambit. Heinricis, known as the Grizzly, was a realist. He knew the main Soviet thrust would come across the Oder at the Seelow Heights. His masterstroke was one of deception and terrain. He wouldn't waste his meager forces on the riverbanks. Instead, he would lure the enemy into the kill zone below and smash them from the commanding heights. In one frantic month, using a skeleton crew of engineers and a coerced legion of Berliners, including women and teenagers, he sculpted a deathscape. 3-layered defensive lines of trenches, interlocking bunkers, and sinister anti-tank dragon's teeth scarred the landscape. In a final brutal act of hydrological warfare, his engineers flooded the Oder's floodplain, creating a sucking, impassable marsh designed to bog down the Soviet armor. But his army was a phantom. Roughly 750,000 men, a figure impressive on paper, masked the truth. Skeletal divisions, teenagers and old men in the Volkssturm, and a critical, paralyzing shortage of fuel and ammunition. To fill the ranks, Goebbels' propaganda machine unleashed a terrifying campaign, painting the Red Army as a Mongol horde intent on total rape and ruin. This fear proved to be a double-edged sword. While it drove some to a desperate last stand, it drove many others, paralyzed by terror, to take their own lives, sometimes as whole families, in a final tragic act of defiance. 3. The Twilight of the Gods, Delusion in the Bunker. While his people faced an existential threat, Hitler descended deeper into a world of phantoms. His strategy hinged on a single desperate hope: that the capitalist West and communist East would turn on each other at the gates of Berlin. The death of President Roosevelt in April sent a jolt of manic energy through the bunker. Hitler saw it as a divine intervention, a miracle of the House of Brandenburg that had once saved Frederick the Great. But the Allies stood firm. Meanwhile, Stalin, paranoid and ruthless, was taking no chances. He was acutely aware that Churchill and some American generals saw no reason to bleed for Berlin. He would not be cheated of his prize. The race was on, and the starting pistol was about to fire. 4. The storm breaks, the meat grinder of Seelow. Visuals: the iconic, chaotic footage of Soviet searchlights illuminating the thick smoke and dust of the bombardment. Intense, close-range combat footage on the slopes of the Seelow Heights. Narrator: before dawn on April 16th, the sky turned to fire.
the Soviets unleashed the heaviest artillery barrage in human history. But Heinrici, the chess master, had anticipated this. He had pulled his frontline troops back, and the Soviet bombardment mostly pounded empty earth. Then came Marshal Zhukov's gambit, 143 anti-aircraft searchlights to blind the defenders. It was a spectacular failure. The lights reflected off the thick fog and smoke, creating a disorienting, hellish glow that illuminated the advancing Soviet tanks for German anti-tank gunners and caused chaos and fatal friendly fire incidents in the Red Army's ranks. The Seelow Heights became a brutal close-quarters meat grinder, forcing a frustrated Zhukov to commit his tank armies far earlier than planned. The impregnable wall of Nazi propaganda held for 2 bloody days before being overwhelmed by sheer mass and courage. To the south, Marshal Konev's front was achieving a stunning breakthrough, racing to encircle the city and beat his rival Zhukov to the prize. The German Ninth Army was being systematically annihilated. 5. The noose tightens. The agony of a city. Narrator. As the Soviet noose tightened around Berlin, the Nazi elite began their cowardly exodus. Goering, Himmler, they abandoned their Führer, scrambling to save themselves. Hitler, now utterly detached from reality, screamed at maps and ordered attacks by phantom divisions. In a final delusional command, he ordered the encircled Ninth Army to launch a counteroffensive to cut off the Soviets. A suicidal order that sealed its fate. When the reality of this final failure hit him, the facade of the unshakable Führer finally crumbled. He admitted the war was lost. The defense of the city now fell to the pragmatic and exhausted General Helmuth Weidling. His force was a tragic mosaic of the collapsed Reich, battered Wehrmacht remnants, fanatical SS foreign legions, and terrified boys from the Hitler Youth and Volkssturm. About 100,000 in all, with perhaps 60 tanks that were little more than static pillboxes due to fuel shortages. They were facing the relentless advance of 500,000 Soviet soldiers. 6. The final acts, Reichstag and the bunker's end. Visuals. The iconic, grainy footage of the flag raising over the Reichstag. Slow-motion, dramatic shots of the ruined building's interior, focusing on the scars of battle. Narrator. On April 30th, the ultimate symbolic prize was in sight, the Reichstag. Its defense was a microcosm of the war's insanity, led by a fanatical 5,000-strong group of mostly foreign Waffen-SS soldiers from France, the Netherlands, and Scandinavia, men who had burned their bridges and had nothing left to lose. The battle was not for a building, but for every room, every corridor, every staircase, a brutal, intimate slaughter with flamethrowers, grenades, and submachine guns. By evening, through sheer will and sacrifice, the Soviet flag was hoisted over the scarred dome. Deep below the Reich Chancery, in a claustrophobic, airless world, Adolf Hitler's drama reached its finale. After marrying Eva Braun, he tested cyanide on his beloved dog, Blondie, and then, with Soviet troops perhaps only a few hundred meters away, ended his own life. His death did not stop the fighting. His successor, Joseph Goebbels, in a final act of nihilistic loyalty, refused to surrender, condemning thousands more to die. On May 2nd, seeing the utter futility of further bloodshed, General Weidling did what his Führer could not. He accepted reality. He signed the official surrender of the Berlin garrison. An eerie, unnatural silence fell over the ruins. The human cost was almost incomprehensible, up to 400,000 German casualties, including 125,000 civilians. Soviet losses were equally horrific, a price of 350,000 men paid for this final, vengeful victory. Epilogue, a bitter harvest of suffering. So why did Berlin fall so quickly? The reasons are a tapestry of strategic insanity and material collapse. First, Hitler's delusional grip on a vanished empire. Until the final hours, over 2.5 million men were wasted in secondary fronts like Norway and Czechoslovakia. A coordinated retreat could have bolstered Berlin's defenders by 500,000. Second, economic annihilation. Germany's industrial capacity was gone. Its armies were fighting on fumes alone. But the story does not end with the surrender. A vast, often overlooked human tragedy was just beginning. In the war's aftermath, the Allies at Potsdam legalized the expulsion of ethnic Germans from their ancient homelands in Eastern Europe. What followed was a brutal, often vengeful process. In the following years, up to 600,000 men, women, and children would perish during these forced marches and internments, a death toll that surpasses the entire Battle of Berlin itself. The fall of the Third Reich brought a hard-won peace to Europe, but for millions of Germans, it was the start of a new, harrowing chapter of suffering, reckoning, and a long, difficult road out of the ashes. What other perspectives on World War II would you like us to explore? Let us know in the comments below. If you want to dive deeper into the unknown stories of the war, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.